not worth their $1,000 to me.
None of them are, if you ask me.
Has anybody taken any of these and done these?
I never looked at
Yes,
it.
I am.
Well, I know you are.
Oh,
I've
So,
got one.
You
Yeah.
got one?
Mhm.
Okay, so we want to, these are the ones from Fox's Hollow. So Georgia's already changed them out. So again, what they did over there at Fox's Hollow was they wrote the name, they wrote the place that they're ministering to, and they just kind of a brief description of their prayer request for the ones that spoke to them, not all of them. So, you know, like there's one here that's a prison chaplain, and Dave and Sally hooked up to that. So they've got that one, and I'm supposed to contact them to let them know that they're being prayed for. So uh, these are here. We'll leave them here for a couple more weeks, and then put that over. And then we'll go from there with that. Okay. All right. Philip, you want to open us in prayer?
Father God, I thank you that you have granted us this opportunity to gather in your name, Lord, to read from your word, to glean upon that which has already been spoken. Father, I pray now in this time, would you send your Holy Spirit to be unction upon us and to go before us. I pray for the technology that all sides of it will hold up. And Lord, I pray that those who have not accepted you into their heart, Lord, whether they're watching or finding this night, oh Lord, I pray the Holy Spirit fall fresh on them as well. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. Quick review. Thursday, I'll do the live stream for the Thursday night hour of prayer, and then we won't be back till 1st of August. And so you got 2 Sundays without, unless I do something online.
When are you leaving?
Saturday.
This Saturday.
Yeah. So we missed this Sunday, and then we missed
Why did I think you were leaving the end of
August
the month?
1st. It is the end of the month. So
Well, I'm lost.
we'll be back late August the 1st. And on August the 1st is the pastors are supposed to resume the prayer time for the community up at Emmanuel Church. That's August the 1st and the 15th. So I'm sure they'll be live streaming that. I won't be back for that either. So you can, but they're going to be in person, so you can go join them for Sunday night for that prayer meeting. Okay. All right. Questions? Bible readings? Anything you read, come across? Anything you've heard?
Well, I know about that, but how about Carl? He had surgery today, did he?
Yeah.
I've not heard any follow up on that. Sue's on. Sue, you got an update on Carl for us? She just shared the broadcast.
Hmm.
The other thing is the 140 Nigerian children. Still no word on them, and so I'm just asking you to continue to pray for that. And then the flooding, if you saw in Belgium and Germany and that, I don't know what the count is. I've lost track of that. I think it was 1,200 still missing or something like that. So keep those things in prayer.
I was in Nehemiah. I'm reading through. I'm in Ezra now. But this touched me when I was reading it in Nehemiah 1. It says, "And I said, Lord of God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments. Let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant that I pray before you this day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel which have sinned against you. Even I and my father's house have sinned, and we have acted corruptly against you." And I thought, well, that's where we are right now. I mean, I know we keep pointing that out and saying it, but it like hit me as when like literally somebody slapped me on the top of the head and said, we got to keep praying because we're still stiff-necked.
Yeah.
And we're still hard to hear. Our ears are not clear. And the whole process of being able to hear, and we have to continually pray day and night. So I want to share that. That was today.
What passage was that? Nehemiah 9?
Nehemiah 1. I'll have to look up
Okay.
exactly. That was Nehemiah chapter 1.
Okay. Sue wrote on here, he's on his way home and good on surgery. So
Good.
rejoice in that.
Yeah.
And continue prayers. Thank you, Sue. What's today? 19th?
19.
So the 23rd is they're on their way now. America's Prayer Meeting left Charlotte this morning, and they're on their way to Lebanon, Kansas. That's the very center of the United States. And they're going to have a 2-day prayer event for spiritual awakening. So it's a kind of a culmination of the last 7 months that we've done these prayer conferences and prayer moments. So it'll be online, and I'll probably share that when they broadcast. So, but if you've been following America's Prayer Meeting, go ahead and get on that because again, they're going to be broadcasting from out there. And I didn't hear too much follow up on Promise Keepers, but I'm sure those things will come out later. Anything else?
My sister-in-law, she fell. She knows center starts hit her head, and she had to go have make sure there's no bleeding, which there wasn't, which was great. She said, I swear, she said, the Lord's been watching over me for so long, I think he's getting tired. I said, evidently he's not, because that's Marilyn, the one, she come down for the picnic, and she walks on 2 crutches, and when they go up to her house, they got to go up a concrete, like steps, and she said she don't know what happened. She thought it was a medication she was on. She said, I just got feeling funny and just went down, so just pray for her. She's all banged up.
Okay. All right. Let's get to the scriptures then. John chapter 8. The first 11 verses is your first section. There's actually only 2 sections in this chapter. And then it's 1 through 11 is the first one, and then 12 through the close of the chapter. And again, this is a lengthy chapter, 59 verses. And of all the verses in John 8, the only one that I've got memorized that I would suggest to you is 8:51. Verily, verily, I say unto you, if any man keep my saying, he shall never see death. And of course, that's this ongoing argument with the Pharisees that they're talking about physical and he's talking about spiritual. We say the same thing. We know that our body dies, our flesh dies, our heart ceases to beat, our blood stops flowing, our brain thoughts process stops, but our souls, to be absent from the body, is present with the Lord. So we don't die. We just, what I use the word translate. We go from this spot to that spot, and it's just a transition. It all happens in the blink of an eye. So I mean, it's not like you have time to contemplate or as you see these shows or this way people describe it is it's like you got to drive to South Carolina. You got a 3-hour drive and you take everything in as you're going. No, it's boom. You're right there.
You don't have time to set our GPS or
No,
nothing.
no GPS, no. Well, what channel are we going to listen to on our way, or none of that stuff. And it just, I think for the Christian's mind, we ought to be resolved on this to understand death and be ready for it and appreciate it more. To be, or you get to go home. And you got too many, as I often say, they got their fingers in the side of the bark, pulling it off as the Lord's trying to take them up. They're skidding the side of the trees off, trying to hold on to this life. Because it's scary because, again, any man having put his hand to the plow and looks back is not fit for the kingdom of heaven. So I don't know why, if you're going up to heaven, that you want to look back and to say, well, wait a minute, I got all these things left to do and to say and that kind of stuff. So they just had a guy. I think I shared this once with you all last week, and it might have been about Bible study. She went to get you some more. Unless you want some of that high-powered lemonade there.
Hey, that was good. I took some. I went maybe the other day.
You stole my lemonade? I
No,
thought
well,
Chip
no,
made that
just-
for me.
Just what I had here. I
Okay.
wanted the ice in it.
Last week in Tennessee, one of the Long Hollow Baptist Church,
Thank you,
Um,
Georgie.
they got a young pastor there, and I'm assuming he was 35, 40. I didn't read the obituary. Walked out to his mailbox, and I don't know if he had a seizure, stroke, heart attack. I don't know. Never really did hear what it was, but flatline. And they rushed him to the hospital. He was still comatose state, unresponsive. And that church, because that's the church that's baptized 1,500 people since Christmas. So most of the Southern Baptist Convention knows about this pastor. And this pastor, who's young in his prayer life, was sent out when the guy was hospitalized in the ICU. They had him on life support, and they said, "We want everybody to pray in agreement that we resurrect this guy." So he went in and anointed him with oil, and prayed for him to be resurrected and come back to life. And so, I mean, he's a young guy, and I saw all these pastors, all the SBC leaders. We're praying with you. We're praying in agreement for you. And they had him one day that they fasted and prayed. I think it was last Thursday. And so then there was no word. Nothing was posted. Nothing was shared. And then it was like 2 days later, they come back and said, Chris has died and he's with the Lord now. And so, I mean, there was a lot of people that was like, oh, well, we thought he was going to. And I often thought, and we've joked about this, but if I'm on my way to heaven, don't you be calling me back.
No.
I don't want no prayer gathering saying, bring Dan back. So I just thought of that guy. I mean, if you knew that you was entering into the joy of the Lord, why in the world would you ever want to come back on this side? And they was all disheartened. And the funeral service was today. But that, I don't know if any of y'all heard that or followed that kind of stuff or not, but that's something I've been watching on the side there for a while with that. So
Dad and I was watching the Gaithers this evening, and Johnny Cash was on there. He did a lot of things with Billy Graham, and he said, I guess he got sick, and they brought him back. And he said he was mad because he saw what heaven was like, and he was mad because he got cheated, but he didn't get to stay.
right, that's what I would be mad. You're that close, and to say, oh, wait a minute, they're calling you, you go back down to where all the suffering, sickness, and sin is. Say, no, don't sign me up. So, but there's reasons. We understand that. There's reasons. So that's a part of it.
Reasons for what? Calling people back?
Huh?
What's their reasons for? What do you mean?
Maybe they're needed for
Purpose.
something.
God's purpose. Maybe that person's not done yet.
Or maybe he wasn't quite saved.
Or, well, there's not quite saved. There is or ain't.
Well,
but
I mean, I got a glimpse of You might get this.
You know, and it's the same thing with Johnny Cash in his younger
That's
years,
who I was talking about.
and Elvis and all the rest of them. They all claimed their Christianity, but they all was in the alcohol and the drugs for a long period of time. And of course, Elvis died in that, but at least Johnny Cash was delivered with the testimony of victory over that. So we rejoice in that. But as far as that soul, again, you can speculate, but God has final say, and you and I don't know, and so that's usually where it ends up. So, all right. Having said that, John 8, 1 through 11. This is the account where they bring the woman caught in adultery, throw him down before Christ, and they want to send her into therapy and counseling and emotional support to get her back on track, right? That's the modern version of 2021. And by the way, we'll have some meds for you too to give you some help with that, right? No agree. Jesus went up into the Mount of Olives. Now, Old Testament, New Testament, this place, Mount of Olives, is mentioned. And again, significance of it is pretty key. Book of Zechariah, you have the account where when Christ comes back, he puts one foot on the Mount of Olives, and he puts his other foot on the other thing, and he stands over Jerusalem. And again, it is the image of Christ's return, Christ coming back. And again, that whole imagery there of him putting his foot on this entire area that sits up over Jerusalem on the eastern side. So there's a road that goes out on the eastern, crosses the brook of Kidron, and goes up the side of the mount into the Mount of Olives. Jesus resorted here 3 times in the New Testament. He went there at this point where we just left with chapter 7. He left that argument that was happening with the Pharisees in the temple, and he says, and he went up into the Mount of Olives because they would sleep there. So he slept there. Then the second time is that when he talks about the second coming, and the disciples said, when shall these things be? You remember this? They showed him all the buildings, and he said, well, see all these buildings, they're going to be gone. They're going to be removed. And the disciples said, when will this be? And it says, and as he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, overlooking Jerusalem, the disciples asked him that, when shall this be? And that's when he goes into, there'll be wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes in diverse places. And this is just the beginning of sorrows. And then he goes through a little bit more detailed part of the persecution of the church. And then he finalizes in saying, and at the end, the moon will be darkened, the stars and the moon or sun will be covered. There'll be great plagues, and then the Son of Man shall appear. He talks about the final days before Christ comes. And then the third time that he's in the Mount of Olives is where after they did the Last Supper and after he washed their feet. And it says they sang a hymn and he went out into the garden. So they went to the garden at the Mount of Olives, and that's where he was in Gethsemane. So those are the reference points for the Mount of Olives. Probably more information than you care for, right? In verse,
Just if we can remember it.
remember, but we'll have a quiz afterwards to see how well it sticks.
Let him take
And early in the morning, he came again to the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and he taught them. Now, again, chapters 5 through 7, already we've seen this conflict between the religious leaders and Jesus, and it escalates here. Matter of fact, it culminates here. Jesus makes one of the starkest comments that you could possibly make over in verse 44, where he says, you're not no business with the Father's children. You don't know Abraham, you don't know Moses, and you don't know me. You're of your father, the devil. So that, to me, is the culminating point of this entire argument that's gone on for several chapters now. But we won't, that's not a compliment.
Said you were a murderer and got all kinds of stuff in there.
It is one of the starkest comments that's made by Christ to the Pharisees, but we probably won't get there tonight. But so he's teaching the people, And the scribes and the Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. Now, the very fact that they brought this woman to Christ is telling us what? Because what's the scribes and the Pharisees? What's their agenda? What do they?
They want to trap him.
Yeah, this is a trap for him. That they can get him either way, for him to commit to something that they can say, "Oh, we've got you now," falsely accused or whatever. But so this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. Verse 5. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned, but what do you say? And there again, if Moses said it in the law, then what should they have done? They should have followed through with it. They didn't need Christ's permission one way or the other, did they? But this isn't the whole truth of the matter. If someone is taken in adultery by the law, back in the book of Exodus and Leviticus, what was you supposed to do?
Stone him.
No, not just
You bring them both.
both. It takes two
yes.
to tango, right?
Yeah.
So they only brought the one. Where's the guy at?
I was wondering why they didn't bring him with her.
I'm wondering if he wasn't one of the accusers.
Probably was.
I mean, none of this adds up when you look at it according to the way that it was set up here, because again, they're trying to tempt him in this. But if you brought one, then you had to bring the other one for this, and then stone both of them according to the old law. But when was the last stoning? In the scriptures?
Stephen?
No, for adultery.
Oh. David?
I don't. David committed adultery, but did they stone him?
No.
Did they stone her?
No.
Well, maybe nobody then.
She actually became queen because she had Solomon and 5 other children after that. So they didn't follow through with it. They didn't keep the law as far as what they were supposed to do. It's the same thing like capital punishment. If you murder someone, then what are you supposed to do?
Let him out on the street in a couple of days.
Smack the wrist and say, don't do that again, and try to do better
That's
next
what
time,
they're
right?
doing. Yeah, but they
But
should
according to the law,
have been an eye for an eye.
an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and a life for a life.
Right.
Now you go back to those scriptures where it talks about in the days of bloodshed, and you think about abortions, and there's a verse, and I'd have to get my prayer notebook, and I don't have it memorized yet. The only way to appease the blood that is spilt on the land is to punish the murderers that committed that. So these abortions that are being committed, according to that scripture, the only way to appease the blood of abortion is to do what?
Kill the mothers.
The
Well,
doctors that do the abortion,
or the mothers are
or the mothers
doing
that are
it,
guilty
right.
of it. But that is such a severe thing in understanding bloodshed and capital punishment and all that. And there is no repercussions for such things today. Again, that's sweeping under the rug, candy coating things, sugar coating things. None of it's followed through. So this here, there's a whole lot of things that are wrong. There should have been 2 of them brought. They both should have been found guilty. And again, the response that Christ gives is completely where no one would have believed that he came from with this. So verse 6, this they said, tempting him, that they might have an accusation against him. And Jesus diffused it completely. Masterful way of doing this. He just simply didn't answer. And again, Proverbs tells us that. What's the best way to appease an angry person?
Turn away.
Huh?
Turn away from him.
Yeah, just don't feed into it. So, but Jesus stooped down with his finger, wrote on the ground, as though he heard them not. He ignored them. Now again, they wanted an answer, so they kept it up. And when they continued asking him, he finally lifted himself up and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. So he defuses what they was trying to get him to commit to. He turns it around not on the woman, but on them. And again, for most times when people say that about people that we know or aware of, and they'll say, well, they do this, they do that. And you flip that and you say, yeah, but what about you? What about your sin? What about my sin? And you switch that in this capacity to this. And then he just goes back to stooping back down, writing on the ground, and ignores them, and allows for the conviction of that statement to settle in upon them, that they finally begin to one by one leave the scene in the midst of that. So he, verse 8, and he stooped down, wrote on the ground. And I've heard sermons, and again, it's almost funny, sermons preached on what he wrote while he was on the ground. And there is absolutely no way biblically that you can say what he wrote on that ground. You can think a lot of things. We could sit here and every one of us could think something different, but there's absolutely no way by the Bible that you can affirm, well, this is what Jesus wrote in the dust on the ground with that. But I've heard whole sermons preached on that, and it's really kind of funny to me.
I think it was just doodling to get rid of them until they left.
Drawing in the sand.
Yeah.
And there's another hypothesis right there. So
Well,
that adds to the other one.
How much could you read if you was writing in the sand? I mean, you can't hardly read anything. I mean, it took him a long time.
Well,
to
I've heard people say that he wrote hypocrites in the sand, in the dust, and he wrote
That's
things like.
who were taking away. So
Yeah.
that's not.
No, I'm just saying.
I'm just,
Yeah,
that's what the sermons that I've heard on that. So
Well, it says he wrote on the ground, so he wrote something.
communicating, right.
Yeah.
But, you know, it wasn't on Facebook, so I can't tell you what it was.
That is not for us to know.
I think you were just go home and behave.
Yeah. Can't we all get along? Is that where Rodney got that from? Verse 9. And so they which heard that, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. And again, most of the times in scriptures, we saw it back in John 4 with the woman at the well, one-on-one. Those moments of one-on-one are probably the best. I mean, we thank God when it's a group, but most of the time, our evangelism and witnessing is when you have a heart-to-heart with someone, and it's the one-on-one circumstance and situation with that. So when Jesus had lifted up himself, saw none but the woman, he said, Woman, where are your accusers? Had no man condemned you? And she said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said, Now go do the best you can. Right? Right, Maggie?
Right.
Go and, this is key to this, go and
Sin no more.
not sin less, sin no more. And people translate that, just go sin less. You know, go try. And there's no trying. Go sin no more. And this isn't the only time that Jesus does this. So, in other words, in this, has she been forgiven and pardoned? Yeah. And again, is she stoned and killed? No. So he said, I didn't come to do away with the law, but I came to fulfill the law. And I just preached this Sunday. I didn't come to destroy life like this woman could have been destroyed. I came to
Give life.
save
Yeah.
in that. So this is a perfect example of that. Any questions on that account? But just bear that in mind when people lessen that statement. Just go and sin no more. And again, I hear people teach this in ways that aren't biblical. And so it's scary to me. He didn't tell her to go sin less. He said, go and sin no more in the midst of that. And that comes back to that perfection of Matthew chapter 5, verse 48, thou shalt be perfect with the Lord thy God. And so this whole culture, North American Christianity, wants to lessen holiness and righteousness and faithfulness and perfection, but that's not what he said. And so stay true to the scriptures and not the traditions and religions of this nation that want to compromise and shortchange God. All right. No questions on that. Then 12 through 59 is one whole section. And again, we won't get through all of this, but it becomes so in other words, the scribes and the Pharisees that brought this woman were defeated again, correct? And how well does that defeat set with them?
Oh, my.
It throws gas on the fire, doesn't it?
Yes.
So again, we've had chapter after chapter, 5, 6, and 7 already of this conflict. Here's another defeat. And so I think to me, this is the culmination, 12 to the close of this chapter, where this becomes a very heated exchange between Christ and the Pharisees of this argument about them not knowing who he was, and him finally saying, you'll never know me because you're of your father the devil. And that verse 44 is the culmination of that, okay? All right, let's start in verse 12. So then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. And we've covered that so far, of the different I ams. You've got some of those marked, or remember some of those? Can you give me a couple of them? I am.
I am that I am.
I am that I am.
I am the beginning and the end.
Alpha and
Alpha
Omega,
and Omega.
beginning and the end.
I'm Jehovah. I say I can't remember. I'm Jehovah.
Well, a couple chapters ago in the book of John, where all these I ams are. I am the door. John 14, I am the way, the truth, and the life. John 11, I am the resurrection and the life. So you read these I ams here in the book of John. They are laced throughout all the scripture with that. So this is another one. I am the light of the world, and he that follows me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. And this is where we ask the question: are you a child of the light, or are you in darkness? Anybody scared of the dark? Make anybody own up to
I
that?
don't like it.
Huh?
I'm not scared, but I don't like the dark. Never did.
But even when you're in darkness, aren't you still light?
Yes.
So the blessing
I think
of
it
that.
is when we were kids growing up. Mom, you kids be home by dark. I don't know. I always thought there was something after dark or what.
Well, I've taught them that. I said anything after 9, 10 o'clock at dark, I said ain't no good happens. So most of the time, if they're out in the dark and out on the streets, is that there's no good
I
happening.
think we're talking about two different darkness and lights here.
Okay. All right. Darkness of sin, darkness of lostness, right? And Christ comes in, I'm the light. So I go over here and I flip the light switch, physical light, in the midst of that. And so the day of your salvation, where Christ came in, the darkness flooded away. And we go back to that, what you said about maybe saved, is there's not a partial light and partial darkness. It either is or you're not in this. Are you saved or are you not? Are you in light or are you in darkness? Are you heaven bound or are you hell bound? I mean, it's one way or the other, and you know it or you don't know it. And I go back to 1 John 5. These things have I written unto you, that you might know that you have everlasting life in this. So he that follows me shall not walk in darkness. And so it again, clear cut. Those that are walking in darkness, walking in sin, loving sin, following sin, practicing sin, are they a child of the light? They can't be, according to scriptures. But in our society, in the culture of the church today, you have people that are in sin, love their sin, practice their sin, no conviction of their sin, and they want to say that they're children of light. And maybe in their minds that they hold on to something, but according to scripture, you can't justify it in any way, shape, or form. 1 John is even more. My little children, sin not. I mean, he's very clear cut about light and darkness and those kind of things. So,
Do you think people have different things, what sin is? I mean, like concerts, take for example. Are they all sin? You know, if you go to
Not
a
the concert.
No, I'm saying I'm like Tom, for example. Is that he's going to a concert? I don't know what he's doing, but is it a sin if you go and listen to people sing, or you know what I'm
That's what you
saying?
do at the concert.
Yeah, the concert
Activities you
itself.
partake in.
Right.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But if you're there, you're still around all that stuff. And
the
I think
purpose, the litmus test on all these things, and again, that's movies, TV, that's any of our pastimes. We invest our time in those things, right? And we call it entertainment. And there's nothing wrong with this. It's like money. The root of all sin is what it says,
I love them.
the love of money. not money itself, right? Because you have to have money to
Yeah.
survive. But the love of the money, which compels you to become greedy, to become unsatisfied, to be miserly, and not have a compassionate heart to give to other people. That's what becomes the sin, right? So to me, the litmus test is over in 1 John chapter 2. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And it is enmity against God. So, what business does light have with darkness? So, for a concert, movies, any of those things, where do you draw the line that it's light and darkness?
That's what I'm saying. I don't know.
Well, the conviction is where you stand before the Lord in this. Now, a bottom line of this is that you say, I'm not coming to church because I'm going to a concert.
Oh, well,
I've never been
that's,
to a
Okay,
concert.
see, nobody's got any problem with that.
no.
But you said, but I didn't go to church during church time. I went the night before and I stayed out so late that I couldn't get up the next morning. So the lack of discipline, I mean, I worked at 11 to 7 and got up and still went to church. So
I'm just saying there's some, I mean, to me, sin is different for everybody, it seems like. I mean, they think this is sin, I think that's sin, And
well, you write down your list and have it all, and we'll give you
I've never been to a concert in my life. I mean, I'm just saying though, a lot of saved people do things, and I look at it and I think, is that sin, or is it just entertainment, or
I think that goes, and I might be wrong here, and I would.
We'll let you know
be
if you are.
And I would be okay to be corrected, but I think a lot of those decisions depend upon the reality of where we want our spiritual walk to be. If we want to encompass more of Christ and we want to be more holy, like the scripture says, for he is holy, perfect like he is holy, then we're going to make sure that anything that we do in our lives that reflect us are those things. When we're not committed to walk in spiritual righteousness, we have a dullness about us. And I think a lot of American Christians in their belief have become dull in their senses to what is pleasing to God. If I'm going to a concert and it's glorifying adultery, it's glorifying whiskey at night on the bar stool, if it's glorifying I'm stepping out on my lovers, it's promoting the LGBT, if it's a lyric that is not bringing any good into my life, and I don't care.
And the term of that is secular.
Right. Well, then in fact, that's not where I need to be. We've talked to the kids numerous times. What you put in is what's going to come out. So if you're listening to the iPod and you're TikToking and you're doing all this stuff and it's things of the world,
I'm not even thinking just concert. I'm just thinking.
Well, I'm thinking
World.
about anything. It can be anywhere. I'm going to go. We've had our discussions in the past where there've been excellent restaurants that we would love to try, but because they also have an open bar, it's difficult for us to decide whether we want to frequent those establishments. Not necessarily for any other reason. Is I don't want someone to walk in and see me sitting at a bar
It's just
stool
like
waiting
being
on
a
a table.
stumbling
Waiting on
block.
a table. Right, exactly. So if we're more conscious with our actions and more conscious about trying to make sure that our walk is where we need to be with Christ, those things aren't even in a question. It was funny, Jackie and I were just talking about it. Before we got married, I don't even know if we were engaged at the time. I was going to go with a bunch of work friends to a particular concert. And it was no big deal. I bought my ticket. I was going to go. And we had a conversation. He said, why in the world would you want to go see that particular
It was Jimmy
entertainer?
Buffett, wasn't it?
It was Jimmy Buffett, but I wasn't going to throw that out there.
He's an alcoholic too.
I still remember.
And he said, I would prefer you not to go there. Now, I had a choice, not necessarily just a choice about our relationship, but a choice on how that did reflect on me. And when I got out of my flesh within a dare trying to tell me what to do, and there wasn't a ring on it. But anyway, and
I think you had it in your work drawer.
oh, okay, maybe I was engaged on in my work drawer. And that's another story.
She was a.
I kept my
Never mind, go
engagement
finish
secret
it.
for a long time. But anyway, I would have, and then I decided I didn't want to go there, and I was glad that I made that decision, because again, what those people did once they got there was not what I would have participated in. So again, I think one thing is we are dull, and in our senses we're not constantly thinking what would glorify Christ. I think we just get into a like, and Satan uses that kind of like a contempting, what is it called? Just a mild, just go with the flow. I'm not going to work. But again, when we're striving for that spiritual discernment, and we're striving for that walk with Christ, that's nothing but that which glorifies Him, we won't put ourselves in those predicaments.
Because I remember, I forget which one, somebody Reeve and them went to a wedding. I forget who got married. And they had it on Facebook, and everybody was sitting around drinking. And I asked her later, I said, do you all believe that that's okay? And she said, oh, yeah. She said, Waco had never said it was wrong or anything like that. And I can't believe Waco believed in the stuff that she was telling me, but maybe he did. But they was all sitting around, you know, with their bottles of wine and whiskey and beer. And then plastered over Facebook. I thought, if you're going to do it as a Christian and a preacher's wife, at least don't put it all over Facebook.
Well, and again, that compromising on a lot of that stuff. I'll tell you how far we've fallen. You brought it up, going into a restaurant that has a bar. I can remember in this area, I remember Pizza Hut right over here. When Pizza Hut back in the 80s or 90s made the decision that they would start to sell alcohol.
Yeah.
And I remember the conflict in the church. Well, we can't buy Pizza Hut no more. We can't go into Pizza Hut no more because it was now, and now you probably can't find a restaurant that doesn't sell it. So we've come that far. In the 1800s, and this church history, 1800s, and I can remember Charles Spurgeon saying this: no Christian would ever enter into a theater for a show. And then it was the issue about going into a movie theater to watch a show. And then it was, it's okay to go into a movie theater, just don't watch an R-rated show. And now it's the theaters are in our homes on Netflix and cable and all of that.
Just on regular TV, it's filthy.
So it's look how far we've gone, and so the lines are blurred. And if you do, and I used to say this, I used to say Baptists don't drink, they don't dance, and they don't play cards. And I said now Baptists do all three, because we've forgotten where we was, and because it's been introduced in so many different venues in our culture and society, the church, who hasn't maintained sin no more, is now rubbing elbows with it. So, well, I'm not participating, but I'm there. And I wonder how many Christians, because they were there, did participate in it. They weren't able to say no and did that. I mean, I remember, and I share the account, and you probably put yourself in this, Philip, in these moments. I remember the first cake party that I ever went to in Westernport. And I was 18 years old. I was already graduated, but I remember good Catholic boys having a cake party. And I walked in there. Now, again, I've never drank, never tried it, never sampled, nothing. And I remember a guy took you had those red cups, had the red cup that they would use, and slammed it in my hand and said, hey, I got to go to the bathroom, hold this beer for him. Matter of fact, you can finish it if you want. That was my first temptation with alcohol. I've never been around. Never, of course, mom and dad never had it in the house. I never was in a place to see it, to be a part of it, except a commercial on TV for Budweiser and the Clydesdales. Or it's Miller Time, or one of those old commercials, that kind of thing, like that. But I stood there with that, and I was in the battle of my life, and I didn't even know it, because I was in the wrong place with the wrong people doing the wrong thing. And my conviction came upon me. It's almost like the Holy Spirit said, what are you doing here? And I was like, I have no idea. But I was left with that choice, to sample it because everybody else did it.
Right.
And there was a lot of Christians that put their stamp of approval, say, "Oh, it's okay to take a drink every now and then." And I was left there with that choice. I'll never forget that till the day I die. And I put that cup down, and I vamoosed. I got out of there and ran for my life. And I've had to run for my life many times because I thought it was okay to be there just so long as I didn't participate. But my very presence there was a stamp of approval on too many people that I participated because I was there.
Dan Bowser's here. It must be
It's
okay.
Oh, Jeff Tinsley put me under the bus that night.
Mm.
He was half drunk
Yeah.
and said that, well,
I know
you're here, it makes it okay now. And I just wish that I could have bellied up and slithered away because of that. So
But you know, Dan, I think that's why we have to stay in the Word. I know sometimes I'll feel myself pulling away, but then all I have to do is go to church or turn you on Facebook or YouTube,
you too.
and it puts me. You always say something, and I think, oh wow, I'm glad I'm listening now because I mean you always say something, or I read something in the Bible that draws me back down to where I belong. I don't belong up here. I belong right here in the
Right.
Word.
And the problem, and I come back to this for that litmus test. And again, the old timers used to teach this: if Jesus was with you, watching this or doing this, would you still do
What
it?
would you do?
And that's the bracelets, WWJD. What would Jesus do? You all remember that?
Oh,
But
yeah.
that came out of
I
that
think of
book
that a lot.
that I asked you to read. That book in his steps, Charles Sheldon. And Charles Sheldon in the 1800s asked his parishioners for them to commit to 1 year and not make one decision in their family, occupation, or their life without first asking that question and in good conscience answering it. And the whole book is filled. And I remember the woman that had the soprano opera voice. Her mother, oh, my daughter's going to be, she was going to be rich, she was going to be a socialite, she was going to be renowned, and she was going to be the mother of this superstar. And the daughter went made that commitment. And she said, what would Jesus do with my voice?
Mm.
And she said, well, he wouldn't go to the opera and make big money and be renowned and famous. And she took her voice and she went down across, as the old saying, down across the tracks, down to the sawdust trail, and sang to the alcoholics and the opiate addicts and the prostitutes, and sang the hymns, and they would come and get saved because of her voice bringing conviction. But her mother disowned her. I mean, you read that book, there were consequences to those choices that those people make. The one guy with Mineral Tribune used to be here. They, with Jesus as the editor in chief, the guy asked, would Jesus print and sell a Sunday newspaper?
Mm.
And he said no, he wouldn't. And so he shut it down, which was their main income. And he lost his job, bellied up on that, because he stayed true to. There was consequences to their choices. What would Jesus do? And it was eye-opening because again, that was 1800s. But you ask that question today, with all the social issues that goes on, and are blurring the lines. Are we allowed to do this? Are we allowed to go there? Are we allowed to be a part of it? And I say to the answer to the question, no. Because once you crack the door and walk through that, there's no coming back. And it's hard in a generation society like this to cut yourself away from the things of this world, but that's where we're at. And it's a struggle with every choice and decision, from an iPhone to Facebook to movies to all that stuff. How much will you let in before it swallows you up? And the church is compromised so bad with it, they don't even know the difference between holy and unholy anymore.
Well, if Emma remembers, like when Trish worked up at Ducky's up there, it's a bar, and they put them cans in there to raise money. And I made a remark on Facebook, I don't think a Sunday school teacher should be working in the bar, and I really don't. and trying to raise money But boy, I got a lot of backlash on it, and I said, your mom, just don't read it. I thought, but I thought to myself, I can't understand why they let her do that. And
Same
made
reason
Marcia,
they let Rachel play the organ.
well, and then they made Marcia wear a jacket to get up front to sing, but yet you could wear Bill or like T-shirts and teach Sunday school. I mean,
Well, I tell this account, we'll stop here before we pray, but working here at the IGA, and I had a book, I'm 18 years old. I've already gone through that episode at Westernport, the keg party. Had victory there. I never drank, got out of there. But again, I learned my lesson. Don't put it. So I'm working here at IGA. And on my breaks, I'm reading a sermon book by Billy Sunday. Anybody know Billy Sunday?
No, but Sam always talked of him.
Billy Sunday was a Chicago White Sox baseball player, drank like a fish, and was sitting with a bottle on the streets of Chicago, and the Salvation Army come marching through, beating their bass drum, blowing their trumpet, and say, come to the tent and hear the gospel and get saved. And Billy Sunday had his bottle, and he chucked it, and he said, had his baseball buddy sitting there. He said, I'm done. He said, I won't go back. And he followed that band, and they went into the tent and gave his heart and his life to Christ. God called him into the ministry. And in the 1920s, he started the prohibition movement of get on the bandwagon. You've heard that phrase, get on the bandwagon? And it was to get on the bandwagon for prohibition. In other words, there was all that in the roaring 20s and all that. You remember the 20s, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And so all the drinking and all the bootlegging and all that stuff that was going on, and he would preach vehemently against it. So all of his sermons, although they were Christ-centered, was about get on the bandwagon. So I'm sitting there on my breaks at the IGA reading this book on anti-alcohol. And every time that I would read that, I would close the book and clock back in and go back to work. And as a cashier, it never failed. Every time, my first customer always had what?
Right, beer or wine, whatever. Yeah.
And it was just like someone taking a knife and just.
Yep.
And my conscience, my conviction was so severe. And it was just awful. And I remember the one night, and I was like Billy Sunday. I read that sermon, and it was get on the bandwagon. And I slammed that book down, and I said, Lord, if the first person that I get back to is a customer selling alcohol, I promise you I'll walk away from this place and I'll not come back. And lo and behold, when I rang back in, what did my first customer have? And not only beer, but the other thing that I've always detested is the lottery tickets. And one, because I was a cashier, I hated to have to deal with that stuff. But I had to do that and again, it was the cigarettes, it was the beer, and it was the lottery tickets. And I said, well, Lord, you confirmed that 3 times. And I went to Teddy Hanlon, who was my manager, and I said, I quit. I said, do you need 2 weeks or what do you need? And she was like, well, what happened? What's going on? I said, you would never understand. And I resigned that night, walked home, and got out of there. And I said, Lord, you're going to have to open up another job for me. 2 months later, I took on pastor of Petersburg Southern Baptist Church.
There you go.
And I say to this day, had I not walked away from that door at the church never would have opened. But my conscience, it's a process. How far do you want to play with sin before you get burnt? How far do you want to dabble with it in your home before it swallows your children? Conscience. And this is where we're at in this. I am the light of the world, and light has no business with darkness. Come out from among them and be ye separate. So we'll leave off with verse 12 and pick up with that 2 weeks. Okay? So August the 2nd, we're back. August the 1st, we're back. August the 2nd would be Monday. So at this time, we'll shoot for that Monday night to keep Bible study on Monday nights.
I don't have my calendar.
Yeah, I don't have the calendar. So tentatively, that's what we're going to set for, okay?
August the 2nd is Monday because that's when I'm leaving.
Yeah, that's right. You're going to Myrtle Beach. Okay. All right. So, good Bible. Yes, it's Sue. It's in Evers family. It's the battle for souls today. It's the battle of our nation today, and many churches approve it, and Christians say it's okay, but it's weapons of warfare from Satan that has destroyed our society. So, brothers, sisters, we're going to sign off here tonight, and Thursday night, 7 o'clock is our prayer. We're going to close out here after we go offline with our time of prayer. So good night and God